Welcome, everyone. It's our final session of day 2 of Crime Writers Week, and we're so glad you're here for our Red Herrings workshop. I'm Michelle from ProWritingAid. If you've been with us all day, welcome back. If this is your first session today, welcome. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. If you can see and hear me just fine, continue to put your name and location in the chat. You guys already know the drill. You're so good at this. Dropping some links there for you now. If you haven't joined our Facebook group yet dedicated to crime writing, please check us out. There's a lot of fun stuff happening over there and a lot of good conversation. You also have your 30% off ProWritingAid yearly or lifetime offer if you'd like to upgrade this week. And if you are looking for replays, links, and slides, go to our Crime Writers Week Hub. And then we have also a master class from Savannah, so make sure you check that out. It looks like sound and audio, everything is working good. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. During the session today, if you have a question for Savannah, please use the Q&A box. As you can see, the chat moves very quickly and we don't want your question to get lost. We will have a Q&A session after the presentation, so be sure to drop your questions there. If you're using the chat to connect with other participants, which we encourage you to do, just make sure you select everyone from the drop-down menu near the chat box so that everyone can see your messages. Otherwise, they just come to us. And also as a reminder, today's sessions were free, yesterday's were free, tomorrow's are free, but Thursday is for premium users only. And if you're not sure if you're a premium user, if you are a ProWritingAid subscriber with a monthly, annual, or lifetime membership, you're premium, so you're good to go. If you have not upgraded yet this week, we encourage you to do so with this 30% upgrade offer that we have for exclusive for our Crime Writers Week registrants. And you can find that link in the chat box. Whenever you upgrade, you get to take advantage of all the premium features that ProWritingAid offers as you work on your own crime story. And it also helps us to keep putting on events just like this, which we really love doing. And if you have any questions about your account or how to go premium, you can always email us at hello@prowritingaid.com. So with all of that taken care of, we can go ahead and begin. So hello again, I'm Michelle from ProWritingAid, and today I'm joined by Savannah Gilbo. Savannah is a certified developmental editor and book coach who helps fiction authors write, edit, and publish stories that work. She's also the host of the top-rated Fiction Writing Made Easy podcast, where she delivers weekly episodes full of simple, actionable, and step-by-step strategies that you can implement in your writing right away. When she's not doing all of that, you can find Savannah curled up with a good book, a cozy blanket, and her 3 furry partners in crime. We're so happy to have Savannah here with us this evening. Welcome.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about red herrings. And let me just see if I can get my slide deck up here. So, okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're going to talk about red herrings. Has everybody been enjoying Crime Writers Week? Type a yes in the comments if you have. I got to watch a few of the trainings yesterday and they were really good. I loved them. And I think it's so fun to focus on one genre for a whole week. So look at all those yeses. Everybody's loving it. Thank you to ProWritingAid for hosting this. And thank you all for showing up. We're going to have a lot of fun. For the most part today, I'm going to be off camera or I'll be in a little picture-in-picture like this. But I mostly want you to focus on the slide deck. So I'm going to go ahead and put that up on screen right now. Fair warning, I have 2 puppies underneath my desk. So if you hear anything weird, I promise it's not me. It's probably them. So just a heads up. Okay, something I really like to do after one of these trainings is jump on social media and see all the posts you guys have done throughout our time together. And I like to reshare your posts on social media. So if you'd like a little shout out, okay, I see that it's blurry. Let me see if I can do anything on my side about that. Let's see. 1 second. I got a lot of controls over here I got to look at. Oh, is it better? I see Bailey saying it's better. Okay, perfect. So I clicked the right button. Okay, so anyway, if you guys would like a shout out on social media, and if you want to show me where and how you're tuning in today, post something on Instagram stories and tag me at savannah.gilbo. That way I can easily see all your posts and then reshare them on my page as well. So have some fun, take some photos and tag me in them so I can post them on my page. Michelle, everyone's saying it's still blurry. I don't know if we have any tips for them. I don't know if it's my side or.
It honestly looks okay from my angle, so I'm not sure.
It's a resolution setting because it looks okay on my side too. So I don't know. Yeah, someone said try reloading. Sorry, I'm not a tech genius, you guys.
If you wanted to stop sharing and start again, that might be the only way.
Okay, let me see. Take us back to my camera. Hello, now let's reshare.
It looks good to me.
Okay, yeah, a few people are saying they left and came back in and it looks better. So I don't know if it's worth trying that.
We will be sharing these slides too on the hub, everybody. So you'll be able to look at them again later too.
Okay, and maybe try making your screen or the window you're viewing it a little smaller. I don't know if that would help. Okay, so yeah, you will get the slides after. So, okay. Michelle already introduced me, so I won't go over these slides too long. I have a podcast if you guys want to check it out. And I have a course for writers. So that's me. Michelle already introduced that. Today, I'm going to show you how to write effective red herrings alongside of true clues so that you can misdirect and surprise readers and pull off a really awesome plot twist. So you're here because you're writing crime fiction, or at the very least, you're considering adding in a mystery subplot to your story, right? And that means there's probably going to be some things that you want to keep hidden from readers until the time's right to surprise them. But as most of you probably already know or have experienced, this is sometimes easier said than done. And that's because in order to pull off a well-done surprise, you need to be sure to play fair with the reader from the start. Which means you're going to need to plant clues that point to the truth in plain sight so that everything makes sense when it comes time for the big reveal at the end. But the question is always, how do you actually do all of this? So how do you surprise the reader if all the clues are hanging out in plain sight? How do you balance playing fair and dangling the carrot in front of your reader at the same time? It's a little bit hard, right? So in order to pull off this kind of well-done surprise, let's see, did I just go backwards? Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. On my side, it looks different. That was scary. I was talking to Michelle earlier and I'm like, oh my gosh, we've been having tech issues all day. So I'm a little bit paranoid about what's going to happen. Okay. Sorry, guys. So how do we do this? How do we pull off a surprise while hiding all of these clues in plain sight? The answer is we use red herrings to misdirect readers. So that's what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at what are red herrings. We're going to look at why do writers use red herrings. We're going to look at a case study from Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. We're going to look at a case study of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which is my favorite example of red herrings. And then we're going to go over my top 5 tips for writing red herrings in your own story. After that, we're going to have Q&A like Michelle said. So I know she told you guys to put your questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to as many of those as we can at the end. So let's quickly start with the definition so that we're all on the same page. What are red herrings? A red herring is a literary device that can lead readers and your characters down a false path or otherwise distract them from what's really going on in the plot. They are most often found in mysteries and thrillers, but they can be used in any genre that requires misdirection. Red herrings are also a type of foreshadowing. So this term foreshadowing refers to all the different ways that an author can give readers hints or clues about what's coming. Readers pick up on these clues and hints, and they try to figure out what's going to happen next or at the very end of the story. But not all of these clues they pick up on are going to lead them to the truth. Some are going to be used to deceive the reader about what's coming. And in these cases, these false clues are called red herrings. I think my slides are a little behind. Okay, there we go. These false clues are called red herrings. So these can be anything like a character who seems evil or suspicious, an object that seems relevant or important, an event that seems to be significant to the story or the protagonist, and a clue placed by the antagonist or a secondary character unknown to the reader and the protagonist that sends the characters down the wrong path. Now, like I mentioned earlier, red herrings can be found in any genre, but the way they show up in the different genres can change how the reader views and responds to the red herrings. So as an example, in a true mystery, red herrings are used to make the reader incorrectly guess what has already happened, because that's what the story is about, right? It's about finding out who done it. In something like a thriller, red herrings are used to make the reader incorrectly guess what is going to happen, because again, that's what thrillers are all about. They're about stopping someone from committing more crimes. Now, why do writers use red herrings? And we've already talked about this a little bit so far, but basically, red herrings help you give readers the emotional experience that they're looking for in a piece of crime fiction. So they help you craft a story that engages a reader's interest and makes them an active part of the story. And I'm sure we're all familiar with the feeling of trying to figure out the puzzle before the author reveals it, right? Okay, I see someone's saying maybe I should stop using full screen. Let me try that because I'm feeling really bad that it's really blurry. Let's see. You guys can see my puppies. Let's see. Is that better for everybody? We can go back to the puppies later if you guys want. Okay, someone's saying it's worse. So, okay, I don't know what to do. I hope that, let's see if I can get this back to full screen.
It just might be your
Michelle, feel free to pop in if you have a suggestion.
I think it might just be your connection.
Okay.
Because it does look a little blurry on my end now, but earlier it looked fine and it's lagging a little bit when you go through the slides.
Okay, I'm going to try to just go a little slower so that maybe it'll catch up with my words. I do apologize, you guys. I don't know how to fix it. Okay, so back to this. So we said that red herrings help us give readers the emotional experience that we're looking for, right? We're all familiar with trying to solve the puzzle before the author reveals it or before the detective figures out who done it. That's part of the draw of crime stories. So red herrings are a big part of this. They keep the reader turning pages to find out what's true and what's false. And if executed well, the reader is going to be surprised by the truth in the end, and they will have enjoyed the misdirection along the way. So they're a big part of giving readers the experience they're looking for. Red herrings also help us create tension and suspense in a story because they test the protagonist's abilities and their decision-making skills. So a crime novel is essentially a puzzle, right? And the protagonist has to figure out which puzzle pieces lead to the truth and which ones are red herrings. And again, this is what readers enjoy, right? But your protagonist's ability to solve this puzzle and to determine what's real and what's false can also give readers a really great glimpse into the type of person your character is. It also helps with relatability because readers enjoy rooting for the protagonist as they overcome these obstacles and weed through the true and false clues. So now that we know what red herrings are and why they're important for crime writers, we're going to take a look at two different case studies. So like I mentioned, we're going to look at Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. And I picked these two examples because I loved the twist at the end of both of these stories. They both shocked and delighted me as a reader, and I know I'm not the only one that felt that way. So maybe type a yes in the comments if they got you too. And the red herrings in these stories, they just did their job, and we can break them down, we can learn from them, and we can employ what we learn in our own stories. So I see a lot of yeses and definitely in the comments. That's awesome. Okay, so another question. Are you guys seeing both my screen and Michelle's screen on your screen or just mine? Because I'm seeing both on, okay, just mine, just making sure. I was thinking maybe that was the problem. Okay, so we're going to start with Sharp Objects, and this is going to include spoilers because both of these books were published a long time ago, so I think we're probably okay, but I want to mention that anyway. If you don't want to hear the spoilers, I don't know, maybe skip this section, wait till we get to Harry Potter. We're also going to be talking about murder in both of the case studies, so if you're sensitive to that, I just want to warn you that it's coming. Okay, so I'm going to just read us a quick summary of the story so that you can either get the gist of the plot or a quick refresher if you've read it before. So Camille Preaker is our protagonist. She gets sent back to her hometown of Wind Gap, Missouri to cover the story of two local girls. One has been murdered and another has gone missing. Shortly after her arrival, the missing girl's body is discovered in an alleyway in the middle of town. So now both girls are dead. Both were abused and murdered in similar ways. They were strangled and had all of their teeth removed, but they were not sexually assaulted. The police are baffled by these crimes, and they think the perpetrator must be a local man, because who else would target these young girls? This is kind of the only thing that they can come up with at this point. So while back home digging for information, Camille reconnects with her estranged mother, Adora, and her 13-year-old half-sister, Amma. Camille has never had a good relationship with her mom because Adora always seemed to prefer Camille's younger sister, Marion, who died due to an unspecified illness when they were young. So as the story progresses, Camille realizes that Adora has an illness of her own. She has Munchausen syndrome by proxy, and that she is responsible for Marion's death. So Marion is Camille's sister. Not only that, but Camille also discovers that the detective believes Adora to be responsible for the two murders of the young girls, Anne Nash and Natalie Keene, as well. So in the end, Adora is charged with the murders of Marion and the two girls, and Amma is sent to live in Chicago with Camille. Amma initially seems to be adjusting nicely to her new circumstances, but soon after she starts going to her new school, a classmate is murdered and 6 of her teeth have been pulled out. And I don't know about you, but every time I think about that, I get chills. So although Adora did kill Marion, Amma is the one who murdered the two girls in Wind Gap, Anne and Natalie, and she is eventually arrested and sent to jail. So here's a quick overview of the red herring device in this story. Both the readers and the characters believe that a local man is responsible for the death of Anne and Natalie because that's what we're told. Throughout the story, Camille becomes more and more suspicious that Anne and Natalie's murder is a woman. More specifically, it's her own mother, Adora. But when Adora gets arrested and the killing doesn't stop, Camille realizes that Adora isn't responsible for these deaths. So she is a red herring. The truth is that Camille's sister, Amma, is the one who killed Anne and Natalie, and the clues are all there hidden in plain sight. So let's break this down. This is what we learn about Adora throughout the story, and we're going to start with her because she is our red herring. So number one, we learn that she is a hypochondriac who seeks out attention. Camille refers to her a few times as an expert in illness and injury, and we both hear and see that Adora loves to play the victim and she loves attention. We also learned that Adora tutored both Anne and Natalie and even considers them to be her friends, even though I think they're 10 and 13. Anne and Natalie's parents love Adora for this, but it seems a little weird and suspicious. And one of Adora's friends even says that sometimes Adora watches the girls play at recess from outside the fence, which is a little weird, right? She also refuses to talk to Camille about either of these girls or the murder. We also learned that Adora has a terrible relationship or had a terrible relationship with her own mother. So we're told that her mother used to come into Adora's room at night and pinch her, and that she would peel sunburns off her back in front of her friends. So really weird, really strained relationship. We also learned that Adora has violent tendencies of her own, especially towards children. So Camille remembers Adora biting a baby on its cheek when she was a child. She also thinks that her mother might hate children or be weirdly jealous of them. It's just this feeling she has. Adora's friends say that she's been acting strange since the whole thing with Natalie and Anne happened, and maybe even right before that too. Jackie, who's one of Adora's friends, tells Camille that she should go back to Chicago because Wind Gap is not safe for her. And finally, we learn that Camille has memories of being sick often as a child, just like Marion was sick. Once Camille learns that her mom is responsible for Marion's death and that she's repeating this same cycle with Amma and even Camille, her friend, Adora's friend, Jackie, her words prove to be very true. She's not very safe in Wind Gap if her mom's medicating her against her will. So based on all of this, Adora seems like she totally could have murdered two young girls, right? As readers, we could believe that this is a possible outcome. But it turns out, like we said, Adora is not responsible for Anne and Natalie's murder, but she did kill Marion, Camille's sister. So she is guilty of something. She's just not guilty of the murder of Anne and Natalie. And all of this suspicion cast on Adora, this hides the truth about Amma, who is the real killer. So it turns out that Adora is our red herring. Now let's look at everything readers learn about Amma and how each clue points to the truth about Amma being responsible for Natalie and Anne's death. So right away, we learn that Amma is obsessed with her dollhouse. She's bothered by the fact that she can't get the floor in her mother's dollhouse room to look like her mother's real life room that has ivory floors. And the ivory floors are a big deal. They've been photographed by magazines. You know, the girls are hardly ever allowed in her mom's room. It's just like an obsession with the floors. Later, we learn that the murdered girls are all missing their teeth. And not only that their bodies were made pretty post-mortem. So Anne was wearing lipstick and had her legs shaved, both things she never did herself. And Natalie's fingernails were painted, not something she normally did. So essentially, Amma was treating them like life-size dolls, and she used their teeth for the floor of her dollhouse to make it match her mom's. I'm sorry if that's gruesome to sensitive people. We also learned that Amma likes to be the center of attention and that she gets jealous easily. So whenever Camille brings up the dead girls, Amma reacts by either dismissing the girls or by drawing the attention back to herself. And throughout the story, we learned that Adora spent a lot of time with Natalie and Anne. Amma also wears a ring that Adora was going to give to Anne. She pretends her mother gave it to her instead of Anne. So she's really jealous. There's a lot of evidence to this, that she likes attention and she's jealous. And even in the end, the girl that goes missing once they're back in Chicago, her name was Lily, and she becomes a target of Amma's because Camille starts spending a lot of time with her. So perfect target. We also learned that Amma is a huge bully. She's known for her bullying all around town, but we also see her bully and scare Camille, even though she's only 13 years old. Later, we learned that she did bully both Anne and Natalie as soon as Adora took interest in them. Amma also likes to be in control of things, whether that be a situation or someone else's attention or affection. Camille often points out that she uses her sexuality and or her favor to get things from people. And both of these tactics Camille describes as aggressive. And later, the detective says that he believes that the teeth pulling and the strangulation is all about control and power. So lots of clues. Finally, we learned that Amma is fascinated by death and violence. She likes hurting people, she likes being a bully, and she likes seeing others in pain. So it sounds like a Criminal Minds episode. You're right. So Amma, she likes picking on her friends. She goes to the pig farm that her mom owns to like watch the pigs get slaughtered and to watch them feed multiple litters of baby pigs. It's pretty weird. And she also wants to see all of Camille's scars, because if you're familiar with the story, Camille self-harms and she has scars all over her body. At one point, she even tells Camille that hurting feels good. And on first read, we think that this means Amma thinks her own pain feels good, but really she means that hurting others is what she likes. So again, all the clues were there, and some of them were even in the way that Gillian Flynn describes Amma. So for example, Camille compares Amma's wet, shiny teeth to mosaic tiles that you might press into a table. So even the language is associating Amma with teeth and floor tiles. And yeah, I see people saying she's a psycho. She totally is, but it's a really good book. Okay, so why is this an effective red herring? This red herring works because Camille's perspective is limited by what the detective and the locals will tell her. She's also biased because of her own history with Adora. Plus, don't forget, Adora is actually guilty of her own crime. She killed Marion, Camille's sister. In the end, Camille's shock and horror at discovering that Amma is the real killer is shared by the reader. And it works, and it has this effect because the clues were all there. So let me know in the chat if you guys think this is a cool way to break this down. I could do this all day. I think it's super cool. Yeah, Katerina says there's a third sister. Her sister Marion died when she was young. I don't know what age. So yeah, there was a third sister. Okay, so next we're going to look at Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, a middle grade fantasy story. How cute is this dog dressed as Harry Potter? I love this picture. It's not my dog, but I pretend it is. Yes, JD, that was sharp objects. Okay, so I'm going to read the same thing again, a summary real quick, then we'll get into the analysis. So after another miserable summer at the Dursleys, where he accidentally inflates Aunt Marge, runs away and sees a big black dog watching him from the bushes, Harry reunites with Hermione Granger and the Weasley family at the Leaky Cauldron, that's in London. Mr. Weasley warns Harry about the wizard Sirius Black, a convicted murderer who escaped Azkaban prison and is believed to be hunting down Harry. Once they arrive at Hogwarts, the kids learn that the Dementors, or the guards of Azkaban prison, are patrolling the school grounds hunting Black, and they're going to be here all year. Throughout the year, Harry sees multiple instances of the black dog that is thought to be the Grim, which is a spectral death omen, and he's having a really hard time dealing with the presence of the Dementors on the school grounds. Plus, his friends are not getting along right now, and their animal companions, Crookshanks and Scabbers, are at each other's throats constantly. During a visit to Hogsmeade, Harry overhears a conversation that Sirius Black is the one who betrayed the Potters to Voldemort and killed their friend Peter Pettigrew. Also, to make matters worse, Sirius Black is Harry's godfather. Harry is distraught by this news, and he vows to deal with Sirius Black himself before Sirius Black can kill Harry. Later, Sirius breaks into Hogwarts twice, but Harry remains unharmed. In the climactic moment, we learn that the dog that's been following Harry is none other than Sirius Black, who is a unregistered animagus. So he's been tracking down the person who is really responsible for the Potter's death, and that person is Peter Pettigrew, aka Scabbers, Ron's rat. Pettigrew ultimately escapes, but so does Sirius Black. And the important thing is that Harry now knows the truth about Sirius and has gained an ally and a father figure in the process. So let's look at an overview of the red herring device. Both the readers and the characters believe that Sirius Black is a dangerous criminal and a murderer because that's what we're told, right? Then throughout the story, Harry learns that Sirius is thought to be responsible for his parents' death, and he's now pursuing Harry to finish the job. But when Harry finally confronts Sirius Black, he learns that he's not a killer at all, and he's our red herring. So let's look at what we learn about Sirius Black and how we put the suspicion on him to hide Scabbers, or Peter Pettigrew. So 12 years ago, there was a Fidelis charm placed on the Potter's house to keep their location a secret. Someone betrayed their location to Voldemort, which led directly to James and Lily's murder. That's Harry's parents. Most people believe that Can you guys hear me?
You just came back.
Okay, that was weird. Something must be going on with my internet, so I do apologize. Okay, so we also learned Sirius Black was in Godric's Hollow the night that Harry's parents were murdered. He was sentenced to life in Azkaban prison for the murder of 12 muggles that night and a wizard named Peter Pettigrew. The murder was said to be so violent and messy that all authorities could find of Pettigrew was a blood-stained robe and a few fragments of a finger. Lately, while in Azkaban, Sirius has been heard murmuring he's at Hogwarts in his sleep. It's believed or interpreted that Sirius wants to kill Harry in order to finish what Voldemort started. And Bailey, I see you. We're being led to believe it's tech issues when really it's gremlins. It's a red herring. That would be hilarious. I'm not that clever, though. Okay, Sirius Black never tried to escape Azkaban prison until now. His escape coincides with the Weasleys' return home from Egypt. And lastly, we learn that Sirius Black is Harry Potter's godfather. So, turns out Sirius isn't out to get Harry at all. He's trying to protect Harry from the person who's truly responsible for the death of Harry's parents, Peter Pettigrew, which means that Sirius Black is a red herring. So let's look at everything readers learn about Ron's pet rat Scabbers, aka Peter Pettigrew, and how each clue points to the truth. Okay, so we learn that Scabbers has been in the Weasley family for 12 years. And remember, Harry's parents were killed 12 years ago, the night Peter Pettigrew was murdered. We learn that Scabbers has been acting strange ever since the Weasleys got home from Egypt. And that's because upon getting home from Egypt, Peter Pettigrew learns that Sirius has escaped from Azkaban, and he's been muttering that he's at Hogwarts. And Peter Pettigrew knows Sirius knows that he's at Hogwarts. So it's not Harry, he's talking about Peter. And that always gives me goosebumps too. Ron buys a rat tonic to help Scabbers feel better, but it doesn't work. The tonic doesn't work because Scabbers is not actually a rat. He's a human living his life in his animagus form as a rat. Scabbers is missing a toe on his front paw. Remember, the only thing left of Peter Pettigrew was his finger. The sneakoscope goes off twice when Scabbers is around. First, when Ron's packing it up, and second, when Crookshanks is picking on Scabbers. This is because the sneakoscope is a dark detector that lights up, spins, and whistles when someone is doing something untrustworthy. And finally, Scabbers is constantly hiding, missing, or running away from Ron. And this is because Peter Pettigrew knows Sirius Black is looking for him, so he's doing whatever he can to get away from Hogwarts. And as you can see, Rowling gave readers all the clues needed to figure out that Scabbers is actually Peter Pettigrew hidden in plain sight. Wherever one of these clues was laid, Rowling used different techniques to distract readers from the truth. So for example, in this part with the sneakoscope, when the sneakoscope goes off, Crookshanks has just been chasing Scabbers around the room. So readers might interpret the sneakoscope sounding off because Crookshanks is misbehaving, or they just might dismiss this bit of information entirely, chalking this whole thing up to typical cat behavior. And there are, of course, a lot more clues than what I've laid out, but I picked a few of my favorites, and hopefully you can see how this was pulled off. So why is this an effective red herring? This red herring works because, again, Harry's perspective is limited by misinformation and the fact that he's a child. So adults don't trust him enough to tell him the truth. His relief and amazement at discovering that the supposed killer is actually not his godfather, is shared by the reader because the truth was there hiding in plain sight the whole time. And yeah, Yalimed, I hope I'm saying that right, pointed out that one of my slides said that Peter killed the parents. It's not that Peter killed him, it's that Peter is responsible for telling Voldemort, which resulted in their death. So thanks for calling that out. Okay, so if you're thinking that red herrings don't sound that easy to write, then you're correct. They're hard to pull off because they have to tread a fine line between the visible and the invisible. And they have to be obvious enough that most readers will pick up on them, but subtle enough that readers believe them and follow the false trail. So how do we write red herrings in our own story, and how do we make them effective? Well, I have 5 tips for you that we can kind of pull out of those 2 stories we just looked at. So tip number 1 is to incorporate the red herring into the fabric of the story. And like most storytelling techniques, red herrings also need to have a purpose. They need to serve a purpose and feel like they're an organic part of the story. So they can't just be something that you pull out of your hat when the plot lacks tension, excitement, or conflict. They have to have an impact on the central conflict and the global story, and they need to be woven into the main fabric of your story. So looking at Harry Potter, in this story, Sirius plays a huge role in the story. The central conflict revolves around Harry staying out of Sirius Black's way because Black supposedly wants to kill Harry. If you took Sirius Black out of the plot, the whole story would collapse and it wouldn't be nearly as interesting. In Sharp Objects, Adora provides so much conflict for Camille to deal with, both leftover conflict from Camille's childhood, so all of her backstory, and sometimes she acts as a literal barrier between Camille getting the answers or not. So without Adora, it would have been difficult to hide Emma's crime, and it would be difficult for the author to show change in Camille because there was not this central conflict that pushed on her wound. So the other thing too is Adora was also guilty. So, she is a big part of the story in more ways than one. So that's tip number 1. You want to incorporate red herrings into the fabric of your story. Tip number 2 is that you want to give your innocent characters the motivation, the means, and the opportunity to commit the crime. So if you're planning to use a character as a red herring, like in the 2 examples we just saw, you're going to need to convince readers that this person could legitimately be guilty or could have committed the crime. And to convince readers of this, you're going to want to set things up so that that character either benefits from the crime, had the means or opportunity to commit the crime, has a strong motive, or a mixture of all of the above. So in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius Black, like we said earlier, is believed to have been the Potter's secret keeper. That gives him both the means and the opportunity to betray their location to Voldemort. In Sharp Objects, Adora was Anne and Natalie's tutor. She even went as far as to call the girls her friends. But Camille tells us that her mother might actually hate children and that Anne and Natalie were bad girls who were also bullies. So we kind of start to wonder, how far would Adora go to correct their behavior? And that's tip number 2. Give your innocent characters, motivation, means, and opportunity to commit the crime. Tip number 3 is to give the reader no obvious reason to suspect your guilty character. So in contrast to your innocent character having a motive, means, and opportunity, you're going to want to give the real culprit no obvious reason or way to be involved in the crime. So you're going to want to bury it a little more. And to do this, you could have a guilty character who is acting strangely, but the protagonist can't put his or her finger on why, at least not yet. You could also discredit the guilty character by giving him or her a personality or a skill set that doesn't feel typical of someone who's bad or capable of committing a crime. So as an example of that, in Harry Potter, Peter Pettigrew is described by Professor McGonagall as being a stupid and foolish boy and as a less than average student. So nobody would have really believed that Peter Pettigrew was capable of not only betraying and being responsible for his friends being murdered, but of siding with Lord Voldemort too. This is what makes the surprise it's what makes the reveal even more surprising and enjoyable. In Sharp Objects, even though Emma has a violent streak, nobody would have believed that she could commit such a horrendous crime more than once. She is 13 years old, and more often than not, she seems like a victim of Adora herself. So even though she's a terrible little girl, she is quite hidden. And that's tip number 3. Give readers no obvious reason to suspect your guilty character of a crime. Tip number 4 is to focus the reader's attention elsewhere when you plant the clues. And this one is really important. Misdirection is not about withholding information. It's about giving the reader extra information and focusing their attention on that instead of on the truth. So in Harry Potter, almost every clue that points to Scabbers being more than just a pet rat is easily skipped over because of the way that Rowling plants clues in her story. One of the ways she does this is that she diverts the reader's attention away from the truth by hiding clues within a list of things. So for example, the creators of the Marauders map, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, the clue that Wormtail was a close member or a close friend of the Potters is right there. He's Wormtail, right? So she's hiding the clue in a list of things. Another way she does it is she distracts readers with action or a moment of high emotion. So we talked about this one earlier when Crookshanks is chasing Scabbers around the room and Hermione and Ron get into a fight, right? So we're distracted by the fight and by all the action happening when that sneakoscope goes off. And Sharp Objects, almost every time we see the real and violent Emma, she reverts back into her childlike self, or she will show kindness to Camille in one of the immediate scenes following that violent behavior. And the more we find out about Adora, the more we believe that Emma herself is just a victim who's acting out. Also, for most of the story, police and Camille are looking for a local man because that's the profile that fits this particular crime. We're misdirected because the characters don't know any better themselves and they use, he pronouns. They talk about, the height of a man or just different things that would point to a man having committed this crime. So that's tip number 4. Focus the reader's attention elsewhere when you plant clues. Tip number 5 is to always play fair with your reader. So when someone reads your story, they give you their trust and they expect that you're going to tell them the truth. They build on each little bit of information that you give them to try to understand the big picture and find out what's going to happen next. if we trick the reader by misleading them, that's fun for both you and the reader. But if you fool them by leaving information out that they would legitimately have expected to be given, then you're just messing with them, and that's not very fun. So again, in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Rowling gave readers all the clues they needed to figure out Scabbers' true identity. In Sharp Objects, Gillian Flynn gave readers all the clues we needed to find out that Emma was the one behind Anne and Natalie's murder. And when the truth was revealed in both stories, readers were able to go back and connect all the dots because all of those clues were there from the start. So that's tip number 5, always play fair with the reader. And this is a key point I would like to reiterate. Don't hold important information back from the reader. You always, always, always want to play fair. In a lot of the drafts that I edit, the truth tends to get left out of the story. So there are not enough true clues hidden within the text or behind red herrings. It's like the author just leaves these things out, giving the reader no real chance at figuring out the truth. This does not feel good from a reader's perspective. And a lot of writers, they seem to think that if they just don't include the information readers need, it's going to create a sense of mystery or tension, but really it just creates confusion and it might result in them losing interest. So figure out a way to not only discreetly plant the truth in your story and to bury it, but to also distract the reader from that truth with something interesting too. And when you can pull this off, you'll create a story that sticks with readers until the end of time. So now that you know how to write effective red herrings alongside true clues to misdirect the readers and pull off awesome plot twists that surprise even the most clever of readers, how are we all feeling? I tried to get through it in 45 minutes and I think we just did it. So let me know how you guys are feeling in the chat. I see some people saying good. This is awesome. Okay, great. Thank you guys. Still not good about Gillian Flynn. I know that is a book that will mess with you, you guys. I'm telling you. Good, but exhausted. Yeah, you can probably hear my voice is a little exhausted. It's hard to talk for an hour. I know Michelle's going to probably bring us back up and we're going to go into some Q&A.
That was awesome, Savannah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
If
I'm going to grab a sip of water.
Yeah, go for it. If anyone has a question you want to submit into the Q&A, go ahead and do that now. And we'll get rolling here. Okay. So our first question is from Jessica. She asks, how many red herrings would you recommend before they become too much?
Yeah, so like most things in writing, there's no one size fits all answer, but you know, I like to think about it as opening and closing loops. So let's pretend that you have one main red herring, like a Sirius Black, right? And then you have your bad guy in the background, whoever that is. You could have an Act 1 loop. You could close that loop by the end of Act 1 and then open a new loop, you know, in the beginning of Act 2, and then kind of get into your main red herring. I've seen writers do that. You could have a red herring that starts in the beginning like Sirius Black and goes all the way through to the end. And really what you want to do, this is a very very loose rule of thumb. I like to say for every you want to open a loop and then kind of, you know, 2 or 3 scenes away from that, you want to be closing a loop. So it doesn't have to necessarily be that loop you close, but you always want to be opening things to pique the reader's interest, closing things to give them that sense that, hey, I've got your back. I'm taking you on an adventure. I'm going to show you the truth. Just hang in there with me. So ideally, we'd be touching on something in every scene, but it's not going to be like you're opening a loop, closing a loop, opening a loop, closing a loop. It's like you want to have them kind of just rolling around in the background. I hope that helps, Jessica.
Okay, Kathy asks, what is a good balance of true clues versus red herrings?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question too. And I almost included a slide about some math on this, but I took it out because I don't like giving hard percentages sometimes. But think about it like the first half of your book, you're going to be wanting to drop like more obvious red herrings and hiding a lot more of the clues. So if I were to make a pie chart, I'd say something like you want to be directing the reader towards like 80% red herrings and giving them 20% of the clues. And then as you switch into the back half of the book, you want to start toning down the red herrings you're giving. So, bit by bit, turn that down and start turning up, closing the loops on those true clues, because that's what builds that momentum all the way to the climax.
Okay, Chelsea asks, does learning that the main villain is really a minion of a bigger villain and thus defeating them doesn't solve the problem fit the red herring umbrella, or is that something else entirely?
So that's a fun question. And Chelsea, I'm curious if you're familiar with the Harry Potter series, because there's a lot of books like this where they have like the minion of a bigger villain. And so I like that you're asking, okay, I see you are familiar with it. I like that you're asking about defeating a smaller villain in one book and then kind of having the main villain track across the series, right? Because that's exactly what you want to do. You want to have one, and Bailey says the James Bond books are all about that. So you do want to close that loop. Like, let's just make up an example. So let's say in sharp objects, let's say that Adora never got arrested, right? And then Amma was arrested because she committed the crime of murdering the two girls. But then we have this lingering thing that Adora's still out there. And maybe in book 2, Camille wants to prove that her mom killed Marion, right? So we would satisfy readers by closing the loop on the Amma storyline. And then we would open a new loop in book 2 to tackle the Adora storyline. Does that help, Chelsea? I think it also depends what kind of story you're telling too, and where you are in the series.
Okay, Amy asks, so can red herrings be several characters who have good reasons to kill the victim and the actual murderer has a more subtle or covert reason?
Yeah, it could be that. It could be that they have a subtle or covert reason, or they could have a totally plausible and obvious reason. You're just burying it a little more from readers. So a lot of like true mysteries, they'll have I call it a closed pool of suspects, where it's like, say, 5 people. The easy example is something like Murder on the Orient Express, when they're all on a train and there's only so many people that could have done it because, there's no one else entering the train. So every time Poirot goes down the track of one person or thinking that he's onto something, he might close that loop of, so-and-so is not guilty because X. I proved myself wrong. But by proving myself wrong, I learned something else that points me in this other direction. So you could follow red herrings. That's kind of a mystery in a nutshell, right? Following the red herrings all the way till we discover the truth.
We have an anonymous attendee who asks, when writing a series, if you have a red herring in one book, can you reverse it in another book, essentially letting the reader know they were correct after all, or will readers feel cheated by the sudden twist?
So this one's interesting because this is kind of what happens to Snape in Harry Potter, like kind of, if I'm understanding your question correctly. So throughout the series, we assume he's a bad guy because of his past. And then we learn that he's actually good. He's just kind of not, he's not expressing his good intentions very well from Harry's perspective. So let's see, I'm just making sure I'm reading your question again to make sure I have this right. So you can reverse things like this. It's kind of similar to if a bad guy turns good. You just have to make sure that the internal logic is there and it's not like, oh, surprise, I'm just messing with you. It's the same logic that we talked about, that all the true clues have to be there no matter when or where this person flips. Because we do want to play fair with the reader. So I hope that helps.
We have another anonymous attendee who asks, I see how these work in novels, but can you effectively use them in short or flash stories?
Probably, but there's probably not going to be more than one, right? Because you just have limited space. Yeah, I'm trying to think of when that would be true, but I think because you have limited space, you're limited to the number of scenes and words that you're putting in that story. So I can't imagine you'd have too much room to use too many red herrings.
Mara asks, do you consider the unreliable narrator a type of red herring? I'm thinking of Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd.
Yes, definitely. And that's actually fun too, because in sharp objects, I mean, Camille is reliable, but she's also super biased because of her own backstory, right? So she's not wrong about Adora, but she does color our perception of Adora because of her own backstory. So it's fun to see all these different examples.
Yalamed asks, can plot twists be some sort of revealing the truth?
Yes, definitely. So that's exactly like we talked about in both stories. In Harry Potter, that's learning that Ron's rat is actually a human, it's Peter Pettigrew, and that Sirius is not bad. So definitely.
Diana asks, so we can make the good guys look bad and the bad guy look bad, right?
Yes, exactly. You can make everybody look bad, everybody look good, mix of everything, whatever you want.
Can you give us a reminder of the name of your podcast?
Yes, it's called Fiction Writing Made Easy.
An anonymous attendee asks, what are some other types of action you could add besides a fight?
That's a big question. And let's put some answers in the chat. There's so many things you could do. Chases, maybe if you guys want to help out, populate the chat there. Chases, crashes, getting lost in the wilderness. Someone says flirting. There you go. I mean, yeah, there are explosions. I'm trying to think, I'm curious, is there a specific reason why you're asking that? Or I'm curious to know more about that question. My editor brain's going. Yeah, look, arguments, emotional damage, premature labor and delivery. So many good ideas for you in the chat. Buildings blowing up. Yep, there you go.
Okay. Carrie asks, an allied question to how many red herrings, how many subplots are needed to enable red herrings?
So that's a great question. In general, I'd say I like to have 2 to 3 subplots in a story. Just as a general rule of thumb, not a hard and fast rule. You can have more, but just know it's going to complicate your story. Not all red herrings are going to be a subplot. So I'm making this up, but in Harry Potter, let's pretend that, let's see, because trying to make up an example off the top of my head. So in Harry Potter, Sirius is the red herring, right? There could have been, like, if the map told him some information and the map was unreliable, potentially the map could have been a red herring pointing to a different direction. Because we said in the slides earlier, we said an object can be a red herring, a person can be a red herring, a misunderstanding can be a red herring. So you can pretty much make anything a red herring as long as it misdirects the reader. And I see a lot of people in the chat talking about dogs. You guys are my people. Dogs must always live. Yes.
Yes. Janet asks, will you speak a bit about how to give a protagonist a bias that prevents them from seeing the clue? If the reader is in his point of view, how can the reader see a clue the protagonist doesn't? Any examples?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it makes me think of Sharp Objects because Camille is so, I don't know if she would consciously say that she's terrified of her mom, but there's a lot of trauma in her backstory. So she's kind of always cautious around her mom, doesn't want to upset mom. She's really focused on the case. She does not know her sister Emma very well because it's her stepsister who's at least a decade younger than her. So first of all, she's biased towards Adora. Second of all, she's biased towards Emma because Emma's a 13-year-old girl and Camille keeps saying, I was a 13-year-old girl and I was a bully. We were the popular girls. This is just kind of how girls are. So she's kind of biased against both, which misdirects her both ways. So great question. And if there's a specific example that you really like, I encourage you to kind of take it apart bit by bit. And what I did to prepare for this is I just took the books and I wrote down literally a list of everything that happened that pointed one way or the other. And then I just kind of summarized it. And it was such a cool exercise to do. So if you're writing a story like this and you want to figure out how to do it well, I really suggest tearing apart something that works.
An anonymous attendee asks, should the red herring be described through one point of view?
That is interesting because it could. It's also fun to think about how 2 or 3 point of views might interpret the red herring, which actually could get a little messy. So usually a thriller or a mystery is from one point of view because you do want that bias. But that's not to say that if you had multiple point of views, the other characters couldn't share the same bias or have a red herring of their own to deal with. So that's a really good question.
Isa asks, is including stereotypes as red herrings a good or bad idea?
So that depends. I don't have a gut feeling either way on that. It just depends what you're trying to do and why. You know, I'm going to use the example that we're all talking about in the chat, which is that a cat is always guilty, right? Because cats are mischievous. So if you're doing something like that, I think it's fun. It's probably not going to offend people. But you know, you probably don't want to offend people. So I would just be cautious. If there is something you're worried about, maybe just get a sensitivity reader to see how you executed that red herring.
Matson asks, I'm wondering about your take on a close first-person character recognizing something crucial, but withholding it from a reader for a prolonged time to create tension.
So I'm curious if you have an example that you're thinking of if you've seen that work somewhere. My gut says that if you're close in first person, you should know what the protagonist knows. So there are certain ways, because someone pointed out Sherlock Holmes. I don't know if that's in first person, but I'm going to assume it is from your comment. You can cut your scenes or your chapters and have the character act in a way that's natural, where they're not thinking or talking about the clue, but it's really, really hard to pull off because in theory, if we're in first person, we should know everything that that person knows, especially if we're close. So for example, if I, let's say that my neighbor, I'm making this up, if I thought my neighbor was guilty of a crime, there's no way I'm going over to their house and I'm not going to think about it. That would be unnatural behavior, right? Oh yeah. And so Izzy says it's from the perspective of the detective's friend. So that makes sense, right? Because we're not in Sherlock's head. So that's a good point. But yeah, so I always say root it in what's natural for the character's behavior and think about yourself. If you knew this crucial piece of information, could you act in a way where you're not thinking about it, not talking about it, not acting as if you believe it's true? And in most cases, you're probably going to find that you can't. So we want our characters to be really natural as well.
Okay, Chelsea asks, can you keep a red herring in a series, as in you don't find out that they're a red herring until book 2?
I would think so. As long as you're resolving the main plot and the central conflict of book 1, you could definitely let a red herring linger as long as it's not part of the central issue, central plot. Yeah, like Snape. Great example, Amy.
Wit asks, can romance injected into the story as either a subplot or as a part of the main plot be used as a red herring of sorts, taking emphasis off of the villain?
Yeah, I'm sure it could. And it could even be fun if the romance aspect of their relationship is the red herring. Like, you know, let's just make up a situation where the guy is a detective and a girl is his love interest. And then we find out that she's been distracting him with her feminine wiles and she's really the bad guy, you know, something like that. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Daryl asks, should your clues correspond to story structure?
Not off the top of my head, I wouldn't say that, but that would be a really interesting study. If you think you've seen that before, I'd be super curious to read a study like that.
An anonymous attendee says, you mentioned never to hold back info from your audience. Won't it make the mystery too obvious? Could we hide a few things at the beginning and reveal them later in the story?
So this is a great question because there's a difference between something that the character does know and hiding it, something like that, and then the character not knowing a piece of information and discovering it later. So if you're saying my character knows XYZ and I want to hide it from readers, that's not very fair, unless maybe it's an unreliable narrator. If you're saying that the character doesn't know XYZ and they're going to discover it, then that is totally fine.
I think we have time for one more question. Carrie asks, is it more powerful to red herrings or to show red herrings through dialogue or through narration?
I think a mix of both would keep things interesting for readers. So I would just mix it up.
All right, we are out of time. However, if you didn't get your question answered, or if you think of one later, Savannah has agreed to answer some additional questions in the Facebook group. So if you head over there, you can post your question. I'll be tagging her in a post and you can just drop your question right in the comments. But thank you, Savannah, for coming tonight. This was great. So much good information, and the chat's just been going wild the whole time you've been presenting. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you guys for showing up. I see that some of you stayed up till midnight, stayed up late, got up early. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Michelle. And I'll see you guys next time. See you in the Facebook group.
We'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a great rest of your night. Bye.
Bye, guys.